This annotation is by Dr. William Vitarelli on October 30th, 1980.
This is up at Ibobang, which is on the big island of Babeldaub, B-A-B-E-L-T-H-A-U-B, Babeldaub. These are scientists coming from the University of Hawaii to help the school which we started in raising prawns and shrimp. We had established a small brackish water pond where shrimp and prawns were to be propagated. So these scientists have come from the University of Hawaii to help us in this. This is 4 years ago, 1976. We met in a makeshift shed in order to start our discussions and plans for the shrimp pond. The man in the white shirt is Droteo, D-R-O-T-E-O. This is Mr. Jans, J-A-N-S-S, a philanthropist from L.A. who helped us fund the beginning of the school. This is the jungle in Ibobang going up to that island. I must correct that. This is the jungle at Ngersul, where prior to the establishment of the school, we had established a pottery to exploit the clay of Babeldaub, and Mr. Jans is coming up to inspect it. Lunch was served according to Palau style. This was Mr. Jan's secretary. Happens to be a playful swing that they had put in for the kids to use. There's an outrigger canoe used on the freshwater river that goes down past Ngersul. A small outrigger fishing boat. Her name is Ann Howe, and that is Edward Jans. And this is the first building built at Ngersul. Mr. Jans wanted to see the progress of this project before he helped on another one. Now we're up at Ibobang, I-B-O-B-A-N-G, on the big island of Babeldaub. These are the first students of the school that was started by the Palauan people themselves with a small grant from the Jans Foundation. They are now preparing a place to dispose of waste products, garbage, and cans and things that had accumulated. We had established a sanitary fill to show them how to dispose of the waste. Here they are, dumping. There were 200 students who came from all over Palau as the first contingent in the new school. So there was a considerable amount of waste to be disposed of every day. I had been at the University of Guam in charge of research and development when this project started and was funded by the Jans Foundation, and had not been at the site for about a month. And when I got there, the place was loaded with refuse. And this is a compost pit, teaching them how to dispose of waste and make it into compost. Sand is added with earth to the garbage. The term below the compost pit says ulangal. Ulangal means garbage. Bespas means trash. So they're starting their compost pit. Instead of throwing it over the edge of the cliff, now we will convert it into organic material for the gardens. Here are some tin cans to be disposed of, an accumulation of months. In the beginning, the farm that was being established had nothing coming out of it. It would take months before food would be available from their own farm, and so canned food in an emergency situation had to be used. There is the foundation of the school being started. All the work is by hand, no machinery. Excavations and footings, concrete, pouring, everything had to be done by hand. Baskets are used instead of wheelbarrows because of going over the rough terrain. This was a big pit being dug for a tank, for a water tank. The school is located up on a hill, and so we put in 2 water tanks, catchments, that would provide water for the whole village that was being established. Each tank held 45,000 gallons. Together was 90,000 gallons of fresh water that would come off the roof during the heavy rains, be stored in the tanks, and then conducted down through pipes to each dormitory. The learning in this school was being achieved by doing. As they built, they learned the mathematics of laying out buildings. They learned about concrete, square measure, cubic measure, and other information necessary in the construction of their school. These are all high school students, with few exceptions of children of parents. The concrete block were made on Karor with a machine where the sand was available close by. We had a special machine that the Modekngei co-op had provided. Modekngei is spelled Modekenngei. That is the name of the group that was sponsoring the building of this school. Modekngei group is a religious group based on the nativistic religion of Palau. This school had no support from the government, only from a small amount from the Jans Foundation. This is a water tank made in the manner of ferro cement. We take sheets of thin galvanized iron, puncture it with holes, set up a form, and then plaster it with thin layers of rich mortar. That provides an impervious tank, water from the roof, in order to have drinking water available. Up on this mound, this plateau, there were no springs or no streams, so we had to provide all our own drinking water. That's a teacher working on the tank. It rains quite often in Palau during the rainy season. Another teacher just walked by. When it rains very hard, and then it stops and the sun will be out bright as ever. Palau is about 6 degrees north of the equator, about 500 miles east of Mindanao, and 500 miles north of New Guinea. Here the children are making rope handles for the Ungal tank. This is Yoich, one of the teachers. They're making garbage cans, taking 55-gallon oil drums, cutting them in half, and then putting handles on so they can carry the garbage. You can see the size of this school. It's a very large school to house 200 students. And this was all done by amateur help. amateur labor, high school children who had dropped out of the public school in Koror and came up to have their own school. The parents had been dissatisfied with the kind of education they were getting in the public school and did not want them to be spoiled or changed into what they said Americans. They want them to retain their culture as Palauans. I am here teaching some mathematics to a student. They were concerned about the condition of education in Koror because many of the high school students were becoming delinquent and drinking beer and going to the bars at night and costing the parents lots of money for their clothes and for cigarettes and other purposes that they didn't like. So they asked me to help them start their own school up on Palau. I was then in charge of research and development at the University of Guam. I had a few of the students, there are 5 of them, of the Modekngei older students who were going to the university, and so I used that occasion to train them for teaching in this school. And they came down when the school was built, graduated from the University of Guam, and came to Palau to teach in their own school. At first they started as volunteers, and then later did receive a little pay as the school became more financially stable. This is the dock that was built in the mangrove swamp. They are now transporting sand from out in the outer reef, dumping it on the dock as it comes in, and then taking it up to the school where it's needed for the floor and the mortar for the bricks, for the concrete blocks. Carrying sand up to the school, which is about a quarter of a mile away from the dock, uphill, using their heads in native style. We had very few tools and equipment. You can see the school up above on the mound and the road that was established up to the school. These are all high school kids. In the beginning, the people of Koror said this would be impossible, that these kids were lazy, no teenagers would ever work that hard when we said they were going to build their own school, but they were mistaken. There was great spirit and great pride in building their own school. These are 2 of the fathers who came out to help. I instructed them as the architect and construction engineer, showed them how to build the forms, what mix to make with the concrete, all mixed by hand, with the exception in the latter part. The latter part, when we poured the floor, we did have a concrete mixer. Here I'm teaching the older people how to play chess. They took to it very quickly and enjoyed it. The young kids became very proficient. Now we're building the pond for raising prawns and shrimp. You see, it's all done by hand, lifting out the mud, throwing it over to each other, and moving it up on the mound. Looks like an impossible task when you start out, but little by little, it was accomplished. This clay is very valuable too for pottery. At Nersul, the beginning shots shows where the Nersul pottery was established and where this clay was used. Yeah, playful children mix their work with play. In an American setting, if a construction man was boss of that crowd, he'd stop that. But you don't stop the play that makes work fun. This was about 1974 when we started this. 5, 6. I left in 1970. Yeah, that was about 1973 or 4. Now the pond, you see, has become vastly larger. Here's one of the old men making bamboo staves. We lived in temporary quarters, which were virtually just roof and posts. Here they are, laying out the classrooms, making a floor plan, which in a normal curriculum would be considered mechanical drawing, I presume. The question is often asked, well, what about so many of the other students? Why aren't they looking and learning too? Our philosophy here was those who were able and interested in a subject would be the ones to learn it. And there were plenty of subjects to accommodate all the students. But it's a fallacious idea that everybody has to learn everything at once. There's so many who are disinterested, and being disinterested, they don't learn. So we try to gear the curriculum to each person and his interest and capacities and aptitudes, instead of making everyone do the same thing. However, they all had to learn English, how to read and write English. That was a must, and again, it was based on ability. Those who couldn't learn very well, we didn't push them. Those who could learn fast went as fast as they could. Now the pond is much larger, as you see, but there again, fun is fun. That was fresh water coming in from up above from rain that seeps through the groundwater. This is the beginning, the first shack that was built to house people for sleeping and protection from the rain. The Modekngei religion is an interesting concept and spiritual, mystic type of belief based on anonism, which means the worship of nature, somewhat like the American Indians. The earth, the sky, produce, the plants, the insects, the animals, all have sacred significance in their concepts and religion. And they were losing a lot of this to the Christian missionaries, and although they have adopted some of the Christian ideas in their religion, they wanted to preserve their own way and their own culture. And that is why they were starting their own school. This is the chief, who is the spiritual leader also of the Modekngei. His name is Ngerokapatang, N-G-E-R-O, N-G-E-R, Ngero, K-A-B-A-T-A-N-G, Ngerokapatang. And here he is looking over the work as it's being done. As you will notice from this film and others of Palau, most of the chiefs are rather stocky in build. Here you see a corner of the building under construction with the tank excavated, ready for concrete. This building took 8 months to build, 6,000 square feet of floor space, a tremendous roof shaped like an H, a middle section, and 4 wings, all reinforced typhoon-proof building. All the dormitories are built native style, but the chiefs in Ngerokapatang demanded that their school building be an absolute typhoon-proof, forever building that would never deteriorate. And so, even though it cost a lot more, they contributed toward the construction of this typhoon-proof building. It is the largest building in Palau, even larger than the schools that the government built on Koror, and built as well, if not better. The buildings on Koror cost literally thousands of dollars. This building cost $24,000. And most of the money, most of the value in the building belongs to the Modekngei. As I said previously, some of the help came from the Jans Foundation. Here are some students who have been working hard, taking a rest. And you will note throughout here that work is not based on a tight schedule of 8 hours. Work is based on when you want to work. The students who feel like working, work. Those who want to rest, rest. And nobody pushes them and makes them work a certain amount of time on a schedule. But it all gets done, and probably more efficiently than if we had everyone scheduled. A little dance in between a laying of a block, a little flirtation, a little resting, all makes the work more fun. That is the philosophy of the way Palauans go about their business. Here's one of the senior girls learning how to lay blocks. The girls get into the work just as much as the boys. There's no girls' work and boys' work on a thing like this. Those who are able and interested do it. If you're not interested, you do something else that you are interested in. Some like to cook, and we're getting ready for supper. Some work in the garden, and some just sit around. They'll be working later. An A-frame building is being erected here for my quarters. The logs came from the mangrove. We built a very simple A-frame structure for office and for sleeping quarters. I can tell someone else was taking those pictures. Here I am showing them how to plumb up a beam. That was a beautiful little house. Oh, I miss it. It was just my little place. This little A-frame house overlooked the bay. Upstairs had a loft for sleeping. Downstairs was an office and kitchen. Cool, had a thatch roof. The concrete block houses, unless they're well insulated, get very hot. An American-style building so often ignorantly build buildings that become hot boxes, and then they have to put in generators to generate power to put in air conditioners. We have natural air conditioning in this type of building by convection. They're off the ground. And so the natural breezes and convection cools the whole building. And this is what the native people knew thousands of years ago and how they built. But often Americans come in thinking they know better, that the American way is best, and it winds up being a power user and not in tune with the local climate. This kind of structure is an adaptation of Palau architecture. Not this, the one previous. This is purely American in structure, but according to their demand. They wanted definitely to have the school building an American building, American type building. So being that it was their school, I complied and showed them how to adapt to the American structure, although the actual design with a steep roof is somewhat in line with the Palau architecture. Here we are pouring a very strong, good concrete floor. Everybody getting in the act. Moving concrete from the little mixer to the floors that were being put in. Everybody carrying about 50 pounds in cans. This went on for 48 hours, 2 days straight. Finally got it finished. It had to be poured all in one piece. So in between work, some volleyball. Their main sport is volleyball. And baseball later on when we got a baseball field established. And in between work, they compete in jumping. You wouldn't think they had any energy left after all that work. Some of the students taking a rest, watching the jumping. There's the school, partially completed. In the foreground you see some pineapple fields. This is my daughter who came up and helped with some of the planting. Now we're getting ready to put in a poured bond beam, which is a beam that goes around the complete top of the wall, provides stability in case of heavy winds. All the sub-fill had to be tamped so that wouldn't settle and cause cracks in the floor. So all the methods of construction that are standard were taught, and many of these young men would be building other things someday, learned how to do it. Coming into Koror over the shallow lagoon, there is Ngirokapatang coming to the school boat. Here it's raining. A squall came up, getting ready for a big wind. This gravel all came from the reef had to be hauled in on barges, on bamboo barges, or rafts, I would say, rather than a barge. We're now pouring the bond beam. That was one of the hardest tasks because it had to be up 9 feet high at the corner of the walls. There's the school now with the roof on, and the pineapple patch up in front. A road that was built by hand all the way up from the lagoon up to the school. In the design of the building, you will note it's shaped like an H. 2 side wings on the front and the back and a cross section. And the reason for that is Nyeroka Batang said he wanted it to symbolize heaven, H for heaven. Down below you see a dormitory being built native style. All the dormitories were built out of mangrove logs, similar to the A-frame you saw, and local bamboo materials and thatch. Now they are up on the facade of the school building, carving in, as is the practice in Palau, the whole story of the village and the making of the building and the history of the villages from which the children come. This is the shop room that was immediately installed in one of the wings of the school so we could start building furniture and other needs. This was a very substantial building which in USA under present conditions probably would have cost pretty near $500,000 to build. Here's one of the dormitories being framed. We had 13 dormitories to house the 200 students. Each dormitory represented a village from which the children came. Each dormitory had its own kitchen, own water supply, and sleeping quarters. This is the floor structure of another dormitory going up. The logs are mangrove logs. Japanese saw being used. Here you see the facade of the school building being completed. This was a lesson in art under the supervision of a Palau artist. Instead of taking Art 101 from Tuesday to Wednesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, period 90 minutes or 50 minutes, it was a functional learning experience that had a need, and that was the basis on which this whole curriculum was built. Learn by doing according to the needs. Here goes the beginning gardens. We had 50 acres of gardens, 50 acres, all done by hand, and that provided food for the entire school and families. Many of the families came to live in the school community, so it became a community school. The teachers, the parents, established homes nearby. So from nothing but a bare island plateau, there is now a complete village. This is compost being put in the furrows to provide nourishment for the plants. Now we are getting ready to put in the ferro cement in the tank. You notice the tank is right in the foreground of the school, so the water catchment from the roof can be poured right into the tank. Completely sealed tank, so no light can get in and cause algae to grow. Another footing being put in place for another tank above ground. This tank was completely underground. There was great opportunity for teaching many things. This whole tank was figured out, how many cubic feet it would have, how much water was in each cubic foot, so how many gallons it would contain, and then the weight, so we knew how to make the structure down below so the tank wouldn't leak. All that was taught from practical experience. To feed 200 plus people every day took a lot of time and work. But it was assigned to various people, and it got done every day. Parents in the beginning would bring food in from the villages because our gardens had not yet started to produce. Here's everybody asleep in the morning, getting ready to get up for a day's work.